One morning, I couldn't tell you which day it was. I didn't have a calendar. Back then, days just sort of slipped by, quietly tucked between tasks. But that morning, something was different. Waking up felt off. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No market sounds, no footsteps, no wagon wheels. Just the soft creak of the wooden floor, like the house itself was breathing. I sat up slowly. The wool blanket had soaked up the night's damp. My fingers were numb. That was normal. But the letter on the table, that wasn't. Light from the window fell right on it. Red wax seal. A small mark, a dagger. Elegant. Dangerous. My door was locked. So was the window. But the letter was there, waiting. I stepped closer. Each creak under my feet felt like a whisper. I reached out, then stopped. Just stared. Every mission started like this, with silence, with a question. I broke the seal. Inside, stay quiet. Be a shadow. Not even your shadow should show. First task, midnight, behind the chapel. Follow. Finish. Don't speak. No name. No target. Just the beginning. I didn't speak to anyone that morning. Not that there was anyone to talk to. Most people around me just knew me as the baker's helper or that quiet guy. They didn't know what I sold or if I even really sold anything. And I played along. Ordinary, forgettable. But inside me were signs of a different world. And now that world had opened its door. There was no going back. Another morning with no bag to carry. But this time, I was ready. I knew the mission location, the chapel, north end of the city. Behind its walls, you couldn't walk unseen. So, timing had to be perfect. I needed a disguise. I wore the robe for the first time. Gray. Simple. Knee-length, wide sleeves. Easy to hide a dagger inside. I had to look like I was going to Sunday prayer. But the only thing I prayed for was that the target wouldn't be late. I tucked a small vial into my belt. Inside was a cloudy liquid. The brothers called it pure silence. It burns the throat. Silences whoever drinks it. Not permanent, but worse than death sometimes. I never used it, but I carried it, because carrying meant being ready. And being ready meant breathing on the thin line between life and death. I stuffed some old bread crumbs in my pocket. Sometimes you need to feed a dog. Sometimes you need to wedge a door open. No one imagines an assassin doing that. But details. Details are the language of shadows. Before I left, I paused at the door. Dagger in my left hand. A wool glove in my right. I put on the glove. Hid the dagger inside my robe. I looked in the mirror. One thought. Look normal. Be normal. I stepped outside. The sky was overcast. Steel gray. No rain. No sun. A perfect shadow day. People keep their heads down on days like that. Mind their own business. No one notices anyone else. Days like this were made for people like me. The stone roads were still wet from last night's rain. My shoes couldn't leave prints. I walked close to the edges, sticking to the shadows between walls. Because if someone sees you, the mission is over before it even starts. I repeated the plan in my head. Entry, north wall. Observation, 30 minutes. Target, man in a dark green cloak. Exit, right at the well path, cut through behind the cemetery. If followed, vanish into shadows. Switch to plan B. I had it all memorized. But something felt off. A voice in my head that morning. Familiar. Quiet. This is the first step. And the first step always leaves the deepest mark. I wasn't supposed to leave any. As I headed toward the chapel, the crowds were growing. Women carried baskets. Kids chased bread. Soldiers laughed at street corners. They all thought they knew what was going on in the world. But I wasn't in their world. I was in the world of the unseen. The silent. The ones who live by orders. That day was the first time I truly felt like an assassin. What tired me the most wasn't hiding my hands. It was making my footsteps invisible. When you walk the streets, people only see your eyes. But me, I couldn't be seen at all. No one's gaze could meet mine. No one's face could say, "You look familiar." Even walking beside a wall, I'd feel like my shadow alone was guilty. Over time, I learned what it really meant to exist unnoticed in a city. You go to the market one morning, buy a single apple, and vanish for weeks. You leave a bakery without looking back, but you know whose shadow you stepped on. When walking, the sound of your steps doesn't matter. What matters is what the stones remember. I lived in this city, but it felt like the city never knew me. Sometimes even I didn't recognize myself. My clothes were plain, not bright, not faded. The fabric not too worn, not too new. Everything about me was nothing. Nothing to remember. Nothing to forget. Among people, silence is a mask, but I had pulled that mask deep into myself. It wasn't just my face that stayed quiet, my thoughts did too. At home, speaking felt almost sinful. Someone once said the walls had ears. I've forgotten who said it, but I never forgot the warning. Every morning, my first move wasn't to open the window it was to close it. Daylight leaves traces. Shadows only follow them. Before stepping outside, I'd wait. I'd listen at the door. Were those the steps of a cobbler? Or a soldier's boots? Was that a child's laugh? Or a silent step creeping closer? The hardest habit. Not looking. Not looking, but seeing a child's broken toy, a cut cloth in a woman's hand, a sack placed just at a baker's eye line. These weren't random. They meant something had shifted in the city. I didn't watch them with my eyes. I watched with my memory. At night, I'd walk barefoot. My feet knew the ground. Wet stone, dry dirt. The earth whispered which paths were safe and which were enemies. Once, I had to climb a rooftop, an old wooden building facing the church. I counted every nail, memorized every creaky board. So in the morning, the priest would just say, "Wind shook the roof last night," but me, I'd be long gone, already hidden in another shadow. Even eating was different. Soup without smell, bread without crumbs. I ate alone, because if one plate made too much noise, someone might come, not out of hunger, but curiosity. And in this life, curiosity is a deadly weapon. I couldn't let them notice me, but I had to notice everyone, like a fisherman's kid, but weighing every soul that took the bait. To be a shadow wasn't just hiding. It wasn't stepping back. It was never really existing. I was in this city, but in no one's life, and that's why I was perfect for the job. How does someone like me even end up in a world like this? Truth is, I wasn't chosen. I wasn't forced either. I just disappeared, and someone out there was collecting the ones who vanish into shadow. I still remember my first contact. It was a winter night. The streets were empty, but someone was watching me. It only lasted a few seconds. No eye contact, no words, but I got the signal. I had to stand near an old door beside a crumbling bakery. The door creaked open, inside no light, but there was something sharper than darkness. Discipline. What they called training wasn't swordplay or rooftop jumps. The first lesson was silence. So deep. You could silence your own heartbeat. I stood in the dark. For days. And omission. No orders. Just waiting. Days passed. Eventually, I stopped hearing my own thoughts. Hunger wasn't pain. It was a way to measure time. Thirst was a test. And darkness was a real teacher. One day, someone came up behind me, tapped me with a cane on the back. "You're late," he said, even though I had done nothing at all. That's when training truly began. Mornings were for wall climbing, afternoons street tracking, nights blindfolded tests. One day they tied my hands, blindfolded me, and dropped me in a market. I wasn't supposed to escape. I was supposed to vanish without anyone noticing. But I failed. A baker grabbed my shoulder. "Something wrong?" he asked. That evening, I was punished. No dinner, but the real punishment. I wasn't allowed outside because in this work, going outside was a reward. But I failed. A baker grabbed my shoulder. "Something wrong?" he asked. That evening, I was punished. No dinner, but the real punishment. I wasn't allowed outside because in this work, going outside was a reward. That was the moment I understood what I had to learn. When training ends, there's no diploma. And no medal. Just one thing. Your first assignment. And when I was getting ready for that first mission, I couldn't even remember my old name anymore. I don't know what training gave me, but I know exactly what it took away. Myself. The first mission. It didn't even have a name. Just one line. The man in the green cloak. Before sunset. Watch him as he walks through the back courtyard of the chapel. Watch. Don't strike. Don't touch. Don't approach. Just watch. But for me, watching was the hardest part of all. I left early in the day. Nothing about me could stand out. My walk couldn't be too upright or too slouched. I had to walk like a common man, not a criminal, but the silence inside me followed even the sound of my steps. My clothes were plain again. I wrapped old cloth under my leather shoes. To muffle the sound. I didn't want to feel like a shadow. I wanted to feel like earth. The path to the chapel's back courtyard looked narrow, like a dead end. Damp stone walls, some lined with moss, others scratched with broken prayers. Not everyone who came there came to pray. I certainly didn't. I crouched behind a stone and waited. The street lamps weren't on yet, but the light was already turning from yellow to gray. Time was fading, just like I'd planned. 30 minutes passed. And no one came through, but my eyes stayed sharp. Every footstep became a rhythm I tried to read. Wooden soles. Nails. Fast or steady. I wasn't watching with my eyes. I was listening. Then he appeared, the man in the green cloak. First, I saw his shadow, then his walk, then the scar on his shoulder. He didn't walk like a soldier. He moved like someone wounded, someone quiet, and I began to follow. I matched my steps to his. He took 2. I counted 3. He turned right. I leaned into a wall. He looked back. I didn't stop, but I held my breath. He never saw me, but I saw everything. We passed an inn. 2 soldiers saluted at a corner. He ignored them, just kept walking, like there was nothing left for him to care about. That taught me something. If you really watch someone, it's not about where they're going. It's about what they're not carrying. He didn't carry fear. He didn't carry hope. Just a mission, maybe one like mine. He turned down a narrow alley. It was dark. If I followed too quickly, he'd notice. So I paused imagined I was just a child walking by, held that image on my face, moved with my spirit, not my eyes. When I entered the alley, he was gone. He'd left no trace, and that made him dangerous. The mission was over. I was told to watch, and I did. On my way back, I felt a light tremble inside. Was this success? Coming back after doing nothing? That night, my handler simply nodded ... and no questions ... and no praise. Just gave me the time for my next task, and that's when I learned the first rule of being an assassin. Sometimes the quietest exit is the deadliest strike. The missions started coming one after another. Some were just surveillance, some warnings. But that night's mission was different. For the first time, someone was actually going to die, and I was the one who would make it happen. The mission was short and clear. The target was a merchant. Corruption, betrayal. He had to be removed to cover up a high-level scandal. To me, he was just a name, a faceless order. I traced my path through the dark, back alleys, past chicken coops, wagon tracks. No locked doors, only open windows. Every step felt like it left an imprint on the stones. Something inside me wouldn't stay quiet that night. I wasn't alone. But it wasn't loneliness. It was secrecy. The target walked down a narrow stone street behind the market square. His robe was far too clean for a merchant. Maybe that's why he had to die. Being too noticeable was a death sentence in this age. It was for me too. But I had learned how to go unseen. I slowed my steps. He turned left. The street ahead was empty. Moonlight slipped through the trees, a darkness reserved just for us. I was close when I heard it. Not quite a whisper, more like a breath. I looked around. No one there, but I felt it. Someone was watching. If I lost sight of the target, the mission would fail. I had to decide. I reached inside my robe, found the dagger with my fingertips. The target had stopped, his back to me, only a few steps away. And then I heard it, a sob. Behind me, I froze, turned slowly. A child, maybe 7 or 8, kneeling behind old barrels, eyes locked onto mine. He didn't speak, but his gaze, it screamed. If the target turned around at that moment, it would be over. But he didn't. He kept walking forward, and me. I lowered the dagger, slid it back into my robe, and no one else saw us. Only that child. But his eyes, I couldn't forget them for days. I kept watching the target, but I didn't strike. I just tracked where he went. And the next morning, when I gave my report, mission complete, I said. But that night, nothing really felt complete. A few days later, I saw the boy again, standing in the marketplace beside his mother, holding a half-eaten apple. He looked at me, but didn't recognize me. In that moment, I understood. Maybe he had forgotten. Maybe he thought it was just a bad dream. But me, I didn't forget anything anymore. That night changed me. A mission wasn't just about eliminating a target. Sometimes the real mission was not harming a witness. Sometimes walking away in silence meant protecting someone else too. And from then on, I didn't just leave traces in the shadows. I carried silent lives within them. Somewhere in those dark streets, I stopped being just an assassin. I became something else, a shadow who remembers, a ghost who chooses not to haunt. At night, after missions, I never went straight home. Even if I tried, I couldn't sleep. My body was tired, but my soul still stood on edge. That's why I went to the church. The old stone church in the city didn't open at night, but I knew the inside. It was once where I lit candles, said prayers, and stared in fear as a child. Now, the fear was inside me, and the church wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a mirror reflecting my silence. The back door's lock was weak. If I pressed a stone in just the right spot, it opened. I'd slip in quietly. I never lit candles. Light touches sin. I only wanted to speak with the dark. Inside, it was cool. The stone walls were damp. About 30 steps in stood rows of wooden pews. Each one felt like a silent witness. They didn't know what people prayed for, but they carried the weight of it. I'd sit in one. Slowly. When my knees touched the creaking wood, something inside me trembled. It felt like every breath I held all day escaped at once. I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't pray. I just sat there, and I'd ask myself, why did I kill that man? What purpose does this mission serve? What do I serve? Answers never came, but the questions, they kept me awake. Because when no answers came, I stayed alert. Sometimes a priest would spend the night there. If he saw me, he'd nod quietly. I'd nod back, but we never spoke. He knew too. Someone like me didn't come to talk, but to forget. Once, I held my head in my hands and stayed like that for a long time. I don't know if I cried. If tears came, my face stayed cold. Maybe I only cried inside. My sins weren't written in a book, but the stone pews heard them. The church had one bell. Small, old, but it rang every Sunday. And when I heard it, I felt two things inside me. First, peace, because something was still regular, because someone, somewhere, still forgave. Second, pain, because I wasn't ringing that bell. I stayed outside of it, and sometimes, stepping inside hurt more than being left out. One night after a mission, as I sat on that bench, a thought passed through me. I don't want forgiveness. I just want to be forgotten. I wanted to be far from myself, from my mission, from the roads I walked, from the dagger I carried. But wherever I went, that dagger would always be tucked in my robe. Eventually, I stood up. I walked to the door in silence. But now, the sound of my steps belonged to me. The streets were still dark outside. I was near the end of the night, but inside me, the night was just beginning, and I knew it. Tomorrow, there'd be another mission, another sin to carry. No one would see it. No one would know. But me, I'd remember it all. I knew from the start this mission was different. The one who gave it to me looked me in the eye for the first time. They usually didn't speak, but that day, they did. This time, be careful. The target is a noble, but she might not look like it. Nobles are usually flashy. This woman hid in simplicity, but her power. It was in her eyes, and betrayal doesn't wear jewels, it hides in silence. Her name was whispered on every street. Countess Mariana, widow of a count. But she had secret ties with the palace, merchants, even envoys from far-off cities. Some thought she was just a mediator. Some thought she lived outside society, because she was widowed, but we knew the truth. She carried documents, enough to bring down a city, a countship, an entire noble chain, and before those documents changed hands. I had to stop her. I watched her for days. She walked alone, dressed plainly. She never looked around, but noticed everything. One day, a child dropped a glove. She bent down and picked it up before the child even moved. That's how sharp she was. That's how fast. Even I was impressed. Eliminating a target is one thing, but knowing the target is clever changes everything. I wasn't just watching someone powerful. I was watching someone alert, and that made me quieter, more cautious. The night of the mission, the sky was clear. The moon wasn't overhead, but there was enough light. The Countess was leaving her estate on the outskirts, heading into the city. Only one servant was with her. The carriage was ready. I waited in the shadows by the road it would take. The plan was simple. Step on the reins to stop the horse, disable the servant, and silently take the Countess out. But no plan ever feels like a plan once it starts. I stopped the carriage. The servant stepped down. The back door opened, but the Countess didn't step out. She was watching me. She said nothing, no scream. Just eye contact, and in that stare, I heard a sentence. How many like you have looked at me before? I couldn't answer. The servant stepped forward. I reached inside my robe and drew my dagger, but I froze because the Countess spoke. This dagger won't reach my secret, but I can break your silence. Just walk away from this carriage, and I'll never tell anyone. Double quotes. In that moment, time stopped. Was this a trap? Had she really seen me? Or was she just speaking from some deep instinct? I hesitated, and those few seconds sealed the outcome. The servant shouted. His hand went to his belt. He drew a dagger. I lunged forward on reflex. The fight began, but I never touched the Countess. The servant was neutralized. The Countess got back in the carriage and left. Was the mission a failure? On the surface, yes, but inside, for the first time, I had spared an enemy, because that enemy reminded me of myself. Silent, dangerous, but carrying something unseen, and maybe that night, I wasn't the real danger. Maybe the real danger was a killer with a conscience still capable of choosing. When I returned from the mission, dawn was near. The moon was still in the sky, but faded. Just like the certainty inside me, I knew what I had done. But I was questioning why I had done it. As always, I returned to headquarters in silence. And no door creaked. No mud prints from my shoes, but inside, someone was there. No more than one. They sat in the shadows. I bowed. I said nothing. One of them, the elder, leaned toward the table. You said the mission was complete. Yes, I replied, but no body was found. Silence followed, but not the comforting kind I was used to. This silence was judgment. Heavy and watching, another voice spoke. If the Countess lives, the documents will change hands. If they change hands, the Brotherhood will be harmed. I lowered my head. I couldn't lie. But telling the truth, that was something else entirely. I saw her. But I didn't strike, I said. Why not? Because in that moment, I felt death would bring light, not darkness. And that light would turn toward me. Someone smiled. A bitter smile. We're not writing poetry here, he said. To be a shadow is to obey, not to feel. Something cracked inside me. Because I knew. I no longer lived by orders alone. Someone else entered the room. A new recruit, young, still in training. He looked at me. And in that look, he blinked. As if to say, hold on, but it wasn't enough. The questioning continued. They asked me to write a report. But it wasn't just a report. It was a test. Are you loyal to our code? That's what they were asking. My answer was clear. I was loyal, but I was no longer blind. That night, I wrote. The lines were short, clear, and honest. Target observed. Pursued. Intervention prepared. Decision delayed due to setting and timing. Target inactive. Risk near zero. Reactivation if needed. My report was accepted, but then something else happened. On my way back to my room, I was stopped. 3 men, my brothers. You're not one of us anymore. One said, you carry mercy, and mercy weakens the shadow. I straightened my back, but I said nothing, because they were right. I wasn't one of them anymore, but a voice inside me said, they were like you once. That moment taught me something. In this line of work, there's something more dangerous than death, a questioning mind, and those who question. They are silenced, or watched. I didn't know which I was, But it no longer mattered, because now, as I walked in the shadows. I was no longer just silent, I was awake. The mission seemed like a small job. A single man, one night, one rooftop. I had started repeating myself. The routine darkness was making my eyelids heavy. But this mission would teach me how dangerous simplicity can be. The target was a scholar who served the aristocracy. But they said he carried more than knowledge, he carried secrets. At midnight, he would leave his house filled with books and move to a stone house in the back alley. The distance between them? Just one rooftop. My job was to wait on the roof, watch as he approached, and if necessary, silence him. The wind was slow that night, but stubborn. I held my cloak tight to my chest, so it wouldn't flap. My dagger was strapped to my back. The moon was broken, dark enough to hide in the shadows. The bricks were old. Some shifted. I planned every step. I studied the layout of the stones and memorized the gaps. One wrong move, and the noise would ruin everything. I crouched down, leaned behind a chimney, my eyes on the street, my mind on my breath. And I waited. Minutes passed. The air got colder. My knees began to go numb. But I didn't drift from the mission. Finally, he arrived. He had a lantern in hand, but he didn't look up. His hood was up. His steps were slow but deliberate. He opened the back door with a key, paused before stepping in. Right then, I held my breath. It felt like he sensed something, but no. He closed the door and went inside. I was still in position. Just as I began to retreat, the stone under my left knee shifted. Only a few centimeters, but it was enough. My knee slipped. The stone dislodged. It rolled off the roof. The sound echoed in the night. Small but sharp. A window flew open. Light spilled out. He looked up. Our eyes didn't meet. But he knew someone was there. Now I had two options. Retreat, or end it all. But something inside me said, stop. This was a mission to handle with care. Maybe someone was watching me. Maybe it was just a warning. I backed away slowly, moved behind the other side of the chimney, leaned against the wall, placed my hands on my knees, and for the first time, I closed my eyes during a mission. Just for 1 minute, but in that minute, my mind spun. One stone, one sound, one glance. Any of them could destroy you, or they could open a path. By morning, I returned. The mission wasn't counted as a failure. There was no kill order, only observation, and I had observed, but I had also been observed on that rooftop. I wasn't alone. There was the wind, the stones, and maybe other eyes. That day I learned something. Assassins must stay silent, not only toward their targets, but toward their own shadows too. In this line of work, time isn't measured by clocks. It's measured by breaths. One breath too late, and a life can change, and sometimes it's not your life. The mission seemed simple. Early in the morning, go to a certain point. Watch someone, and intervene if the signal is given. I had done this many times before, but that morning, everything was ruined by one stone, and a man's fate. The city was crowded that morning. The usual routes were quiet, but that day, they clashed with the market. People shouted, vendors rang bells, children ran. I had planned to circle around a quieter path, but longer. I didn't realize it then. I was racing time when I reached the corner. I was only 30 steps away from the target, but just as I turned, a construction stone shifted. The road was blocked. A group of men tried to move it. I couldn't pass. I had to take a side alley. It was longer, but I had no choice. I didn't run. Running draws attention, but I moved faster. My steps were silent, but my rhythm was frantic. Inside, something said, "You're late." My body said, "No, I'll make it." But the mind is always more honest. As I turned the last corner, I could finally see my target, but he wasn't alone. Another figure stood at the edge, waiting for a signal. A cue, but I didn't see the signal. I saw the outcome. The man dropped to the ground. It happened in seconds. The target was hit. The killer escaped, and me. I could only watch. It was too late. If I intervened, I'd be exposed, caught, and more lives could be lost. So I hid in a dark corner and watched, my hand on my dagger, but my hand stayed empty. The mission had failed. Worse, the mission had been completed by someone else, and in this world, if someone else finishes your task, it means you missed something or left something open. Back at headquarters, no one questioned me. The result was already known. I was late, and in this job, lateness isn't something you confess with pride. But no one punished me, and that was worse, because I couldn't forgive myself. I didn't know the man's name. But that morning, I hadn't decided his time of death, and that was what ate at me. Failing at a job is one thing, but failing without even trying, just being too late to act, makes even silence unbearable. After that day, I looked at time differently, not in minutes, but in breaths. Every step, every shadow, every transition now spoke in seconds, and I learned. An assassin's greatest enemy isn't the sword. It isn't being seen, it's being too late. Before that mission, everything seemed ordinary. The target was a merchant who stopped by a small tavern every night at the same hour. The mission was to neutralize him before he sat at his usual table. The plan was simple, the timing clear, but no plan is ever truly simple, because this time, everything spiraled out of control, and for the first time, I was truly afraid. There was unease in me as I prepared. I'd felt it before, but this was different. It was as if the whole city was silent, but the silence wasn't mine. It belonged to someone else. It felt like I was in the wrong place, missing something crucial. Still, I moved forward. I climbed onto the roof across the street from the tavern. From there, I had a clear view of the front door and back exit. The darkness was enough. The moon was hidden. Everything favored invisibility. When the target arrived, he was alone. His shoulders were low, but his steps were steady. He didn't pause as he entered, exactly as planned. I was about to descend, but I heard something behind me, a whisper, but loud enough for someone like me. "You're late." I turned. And no one there, but he was. Another shadow, someone like me. Suddenly, ice ran through me, because this was another assassin, someone who knew me and wasn't part of the plan. I stepped back. My foot slipped, a tile cracked, a pigeon flew, the tavern door opened. Someone looked out. Customer or target, I couldn't tell, but the night no longer belonged to me. It had unraveled. The plan was gone. I climbed down quickly, pressed my back to the wall. My breath was fast, but I had to stay quiet, the only thing on my mind. This mission is no longer mine. I walked toward the corner, but I felt eyes on me. I knew someone was following. I didn't break pace. I didn't turn, but my palms were sweating. My dagger felt glued to my hand, a snap decision. Turn into the alley, disappear in the dark. I ran, but this wasn't stealth anymore. It was escape. I hid in a narrow passage, crouched down, waited. My heart pounded in my throat. This was panic, raw primal panic, not shadow silence, but an internal scream. That moment, I realized I was afraid, and for the first time. I didn't want to kill to survive. I just wanted not to be seen. The mission failed that night. But the real failure was inside me. My self-trust had cracked. Who was that shadow? Why was he there? Why was he watching me? And most of all, Was I still in control? I returned to HQ, told no one, just said, mission canceled, but inside, something shifted because that night I learned, even in the shadows, you're never truly alone, and sometimes the darkest fear lives in your own shadow. After that night, nothing was the same. It felt like every stone, every shadow, every wall was pushing me away. The city was the same, but something inside me was missing, a piece, maybe the quietest one. I no longer waited for missions. The others said nothing. But the absence of a summons said enough. NOI contact. NO letters under the door. And for the first time, I welcomed the silence. Time slowed down. Mornings lasted longer. I no longer checked my dagger when I woke up. I stopped hiding my shoes, even if someone had been watching me. I wouldn't have noticed. I didn't go outside for days. I stayed inside, alone with my own shadow. Darkness was necessary, because I was already dark inside. One morning, I looked out the window. A woman was hanging laundry in the street. A small child ran between the flapping sheets. He was laughing. That laugh hit my walls and echoed inside me. Because I hadn't laughed in so long, and when someone else did, something inside me cracked. I thought about the past, the first mission, the first letter, the first silence. They all felt like mine. But no longer with me. I was fading, but not by hiding. This time, by being forgotten. Loneliness is not the same as silence. Silence is your choice. Loneliness comes despite you, and I had started to meet it. First, doors stopped speaking. Then, windows turned their backs on the world, eventually. Even your own name feels foreign. The more alone you are, the more your thoughts change. Your eyes search not for what they see, but what they've forgotten. You wait for a voice, but nothing comes, and over time, you stop waiting. I realized this at night. The stove had gone cold. The room was freezing, but I didn't move, because the cold wasn't just around me anymore. It was inside me. Those days, I just walked, nowhere in particular, not along the shadows, but through crowds. And no one noticed me, and for the first time, being unseen felt like peace. Maybe I had no mission now, maybe no place either, but for the first time, I could breathe without purpose. That evening, I sat in front of a small church. I didn't go in, just sat on the stone steps. The birds were silent, the wind stopped. And with the night came something familiar. Acceptance. This is who I am alone, and maybe this is the way to live with the least harm. In recent weeks, my sleep changed. Nights used to be pure silence. Darkness would come and pass by me without a word. But now, nights were speaking, and voices were returning. Were they dreams or the distortions of memory? I couldn't tell. But everything feels clearer in sleep, and I didn't want to wake up. At first, I saw my past missions, but this time, I wasn't the observer, I was the target. Someone stood in the corner, holding a dagger, watching me, eyes shadowed, but familiar. It felt like I was looking at myself. I wanted to run, but my feet were like stone. I couldn't move. I woke up, but the silence inside me grew deeper. On later nights, other voices came. The voice of my first instructor. You can't be a shadow unless you move. But this time, my own voice answered. I no longer want to be a shadow. My sleep broke. But for the first time, I felt lighter for having said it. One night, I saw the Countess, the one I didn't kill. This time, she stayed in the carriage, but she smiled at me and simply said, "You made a choice, and it's keeping you alive." I woke strangely calm. Maybe I had forgiven myself, or maybe I had just accepted this false peace as real. Even during the day, the echoes came. A stranger's footsteps matched those from a mission years ago. A vendor's shout mirrored the morning before my first kill. My mind was mixing time, past and present blending. The line between dream and reality faded, but I wasn't afraid because dreams are sometimes more honest than life. Loneliness and time becomes your identity, but dreams remind you who you were. Who was I? An assassin? A shadow? Or just a man who had lost his voice? Maybe all of them, maybe none. One night, I remembered a lullaby my mother sang to me. I hadn't heard it in years, but suddenly, my lips moved. I remembered the words. Sleep now, shadows will pass. Tomorrow, the light will slowly come. Double quotes. It startled me that something so innocent could still come from me. It broke me and healed me. Eventually, I made peace with the dreams. They stopped feeling like punishment and became like letters, some from the past, some from places I've never known, but each one kept me alive because I had no missions left, and when I had no reason to wake up, I simply began to live in my dreams. I hadn't been given a mission in a long time. I had faded into the shadows, slowly left to be forgotten, but one morning, the silent message returned. It was slipped under my door. And no envelope, no seal, just a folded yellow parchment. Inside, one sentence. Father Gregor. Tomorrow night. Church courtyard. Finish it. My hands trembled as I read it, because that name wasn't a stranger. Father Gregor was one of the very few who knew me. In the monastery where I stayed as a child. He was the one who first handed me bread, the first to gently correct my prayers when I stumbled, the only one who could hear me, even in silence. And now, I was ordered to kill him. That day, I ate nothing. I didn't sleep, didn't speak. I just walked through the streets. Silent footsteps matched to a rhythm I couldn't silence in my mind. A voice echoed in my head. Father Gregor. He never hurt you, but the order is clear. He forgave you when you were a child, but now I'm a shadow. Double quotes. No. I didn't want to be a shadow anymore. Still, night came, and I was there. In the church courtyard, among the silent stones, hidden in darkness. The moon was high. Gregor walked alone in the garden, candle in hand, head bowed. No guards, because he believed he didn't need them. He trusted in God's protection. But that night, God was silent, and I was there, holding death in my hands. I approached. My steps were so careful. It felt like even my soul couldn't hear them. But Gregor stopped. He spoke without lifting his head. Before you arrived, I imagined you, he said. I knew, after all these years, you'd come like a shadow. I froze, said nothing. He turned to me. There was no fear in his eyes, only fatigue. I forgave you, child. I always did. Now ask your conscience if you came to kill me tonight. It won't be God who judges you. It will be yourself. My hands were shaking. The dagger inside my robe now felt closer to my heart, but I couldn't draw it. I just bowed my head. I looked at him as a man, and for the first time during a mission, I backed away in silence. As I turned, Gregor whispered, "There's no light in the darkness you walk, but some shadows reveal truth better than light." That night, my dagger never left its place, but something inside me shattered like a sword. I didn't kill Gregor, and he didn't silence me, but that night, we both buried a part of ourselves. I didn't return to headquarters. There was no report, and maybe I truly stepped out of the shadows. I don't remember my name, my real name. Once it was spoken. By a mother, a teacher, a childhood friend. But then, each mission, each letter, each night erased it bit by bit. Now, it's just a shadow in my mind. If someone called out, "Who are you?" I'd stay silent, because I have no answer to give. I haven't asked myself that question in a long time, but after the last mission, I couldn't forget the priest's eyes. That look, that silence that said he knew who I was ... It weighed more than my real name ever did. What changes with a name? I don't live by orders anymore, but every moment I breathe is still beneath their shadow. I don't look for myself in mirrors now. Even my reflection doesn't recognize me. The lines on my face aren't from duty, they're regrets. My hands, once as cold as a dagger, aren't sharp anymore. I remember a child once looked at me ... in the market, holding an apple. He met my eyes and paused for a moment, then asked, "Are you a soldier?" I couldn't answer because I didn't want to lie, but I couldn't tell the truth either. The child expected a soldier, but I was just a ghost. I once had comrades, those who walked the same stone path, but we didn't speak, because in this line of work, words are weakness. But silence eats at you. I don't know where they are now. Maybe dead in a mission. Maybe, like me, lost in the shadows, but sometimes walking through a crowd. A breath rhythm next to mine tells me we once trained together. Voices echo in my mind, but no sound, only faces. Each of them seems to want something, but I recognize none because I don't even know myself. Once, I had faith ... in God, in justice and order. Then the targets came, then the orders, then emptiness. Now only habit remains ... to hide ... to be silent ... to forget. I've realized something ... no one is looking for me anymore ... no letters arrive ... no steps approach my door. And it doesn't scare me ... it feels like peace. Because at last, I've stopped searching for myself. I don't ask, who am I? Anymore, because there is no answer. Or maybe this is the answer. I'm someone who no longer asks. I've lost my name, my title, my duty, but for the first time. I'm not lying for the first time. I am simply what I am ... a T-night. There's no call ... and no voice ... and no command. Only dreams, and sometimes silence. It was time to go. This city no longer knew me, and I no longer knew it ... and no walls spoke. No stones remembered my steps. Even the shadows felt unfamiliar. Staying here wasn't survival ... it was a slow death, and I didn't want to die. But I hadn't really started living either. I just wanted to leave. I made no preparations ... in this work. Preparation leaves traces. I took no bag, no map, only my memory and my silence. I left at the deepest hour of night. There was no moon ... and no streetlights. Everything seemed to help me ... as I passed corners. I walked by old mission sites, a marketplace, a stone wall, an old inn. Each one whispered a command from the past, but none stopped me. You don't leave the city through gates. They're guarded. I knew the back walls, behind an abandoned mill. There's a broken stone. Beneath it, a passage. If you're careful, you can slip through. And I did. I didn't look back, because if I looked, I'd stay, and staying in that city meant dying while breathing. I started walking, slowly, still placing my steps carefully. Habits don't fade easily. I didn't bring my dagger, but I still felt the empty weight on my belt ... as if I carried not something missing, but something that took from me. The road was long, but time was no longer a measure. When the sun rose, I realized I wasn't just leaving the city. I was leaving myself. With each step, a piece of the past faded. My first mission, first watch, first fear. It felt like walking made me lighter, or quieter, maybe freer. I reached a hill. Below, by the river, was a small village. Smoke rose from chimneys, birds flew overhead. That place didn't know me, and that's exactly why I had to go there for the first time. I had no plan for where I was going, but I also wasn't afraid. The shadows no longer held me. They stayed in the city. I walked into the unknown ... in the past. Every step had a purpose. Now each step was just a step, and that was peace. I stopped one last time, closed my eyes, didn't think of the city, didn't recall names, missions, commands. I just said to myself, I'm leaving and no one will know, but this time, I'll leave no trace. Then I kept walking. I dug the soil, small mushrooms' roots. I drank from the river, and at night, I lit fires, but the real task wasn't to live. It was to exist ... in a silent forest. Not just your body is bare, your thoughts are too. Mine were the first few days. Time slowed down. The sun rose and fell. But I no longer counted. I tracked the day by the shifting direction of shadows. Nights were long, cold, silent, but not frightening. Because fear no longer lived in me, ... I stayed in the city, where I left my traces. The dreams continued, but they changed ... and no more blood ... and no more targets. Only childhood memories ... an old bakery, a small stone chapel, a sunny afternoon, a breeze that sounded like my mother's voice when I woke up. I didn't feel guilty because those moments felt like they belonged to me. And maybe, for the first time, I had truly rested. I built a shelter among the trees, laid branches on the ground, covered them with moss and dry leaves ... It wasn't warm like a stove, but it protected me. I woke to bird songs, slept with the wind and this rhythm. Slowly calmed the chaos inside me. One morning, walking through the forest, I saw a deer track. The prints were fresh, but the animal was gone. Only its past remained, just like me. I was a track too, but no one was following anymore ... in the forest. Speaking felt unnecessary. Every sound felt too much for nature ... Oh, my silence deepened. But this time, it wasn't unsettling. This silence was healing. One evening, by the fire, I started digging the soil with my hand. I didn't know what I was searching for, but something inside me whispered. I wanted to bury my past, and while digging, I found a stone. Small oval, smooth, like someone had held it for years. I picked it up, gripped it, and whispered, "It's over." Then I didn't throw it in the fire. I placed it on the ground and covered it, because the past can't be destroyed, but it can be buried and in the forest. Life was like that. Hunger fades, cold passes, but tracks are shared only with nature ... and no dagger ... and no mission. Silence wasn't punishment. Sometimes it was the best answer. The first thing I saw when I left the forest was a chimney ... It rose from a simple house made of plain gray stones. Smoke curled gently upward. There was no danger, but also nothing familiar. This was another place, too open, too alive for someone like me. But I had no other choice. I could either hide again, or take my first real step into what people called living. I entered the village ... and no one turned to look. I had no sack on my back ... and no sword in my hand ... and no story on my face. And maybe that's why no one cared ... It hurt a little. But it also brought peace for the first time. I didn't need to explain my past. Just being was enough ... in the village square. There was an old fountain. The water was cool and clean after all the roads I'd walked. For the first time, I drank without reaching for a weapon. That was new. A woman stopped me. Her face was wrinkled, her hands dusted with flour. "Are you a traveler?" she asked. I swallowed. Then one sentence left my lips. "Not anymore." She nodded. "Then you can help. We've been looking for someone to fix the bakery." I didn't know how, but I nodded, because now it wasn't about who you were, but what someone needed. The village was small. Names mattered, but no one asked for mine. The first day I was the stranger. 3 days later, the quiet one. A week later, the man across from the bakery. And I liked those titles because they held no past, Children played ball. I watched. One asked me, "What did you play when you were a kid?" I couldn't answer because I didn't remember or didn't want to. But I smiled, and that was enough. I learned the bakery's stones over time, which held heat, which cracked easily, how to roll dough, how to sweep ash. It wasn't as complex as holding a weapon, but it meant more because this time. What I made wasn't a broken life. It was bread. One day, a small child came up to me. There was a scratch on his hand. "It hurts," he said. I didn't know what to do. I knelt, held his hand, then simply said, "It'll pass." And in that moment, I realized some things in me had passed too. Shadows no longer followed me, but sometimes I walked through them. If someone shouted, "Hey," behind me, my hand instinctively went to my belt, but there was no dagger, only emptiness. And that emptiness was slowly becoming something else. Lightness. Evenings came early in the village. I'd sit by the stove, warmed by soup. People didn't talk much, and that suited me, because I didn't want to speak to my past, and maybe my future was just this, simple, quiet, unseen, but for the first time, painless. Night has fallen. The wind outside is slow but steady. The stove hisses gently. The flames no longer crackle. They just glow softly, and me. For the first time, I sit without a mission. I'm not watching anyone. I'm not following anyone. I'm not waiting for a signal. Tonight, I do nothing. Tonight, I simply exist. I sit on a small wooden chair by the stove. I'm tired, but for the first time, this tiredness isn't from duty, not from war, not from living in someone's shadow. It's just the fatigue of having lived, and somehow it feels good. I look out the window. Darkness, but not the threatening kind. The shadows are still there, but they no longer belong to me, and I no longer belong to them. The night I once hid from in fear now feels like a blanket, cool, quiet, safe. I reach toward the stove. My palms are calloused but empty. They once gripped a dagger. Now they struggle to hold a teacup. I sip the last drop. The taste is plain, and somehow, that tastes like peace. I approach the bed. The wood creaks. But now, that sound doesn't feel like a threat. A tea feels like a childhood memory, like a house breathing. I sit slowly. Fatigue rises from my legs to my head, my shoulders. Finally release the weight of the years. I lie down. The fabric is cool. The blanket is light. And a command echoes inside me. And a voice pushes me. And a mission awaits me. Tonight, there is only me. I close my eyes, and my thoughts no longer come like mission reports. They drift like dreams. A village, a child, a stone oven, clean water. Just a man breathing if someone asked. A final word? A last order? A regret? I'd say, no, tonight I want nothing. Just to sleep, lying on my back. My heart slows, my eyelids grow heavy, and within me, a single sentence echoes. It's over, the stove is nearly out, but I'm not cold, because inside, there is no mission left, only rest. And tonight, for the first time in years, I will truly sleep.